What is the last thing that stopped you in your tracks? Not just something you noticed, but something that interrupted you. It made you feel more alive, more connected, more human. April is National Poetry Month, and as the poet William Carlos Williams wrote, "It is difficult to get the news from poems, yet many die miserably every day for lack of what is found there." That's a startling claim, that something essential to our survival, our thriving, might be found not in the headlines, but in poetry. Williams died in 1963, and if that was true in his time, it may be even more true in our own. When the news cycle feels unrelenting, saturated with fear, division, grief, Williams reminds us that poetry is not an escape from reality, it is a way of entering more deeply into it. And I want to suggest something more. Poetry doesn't just help us see the world differently, it helps us become the kind of people that our world desperately needs. People more open, more connected, more alive to one another. As Audre Lorde reminds us, poetry is not a luxury. It is sustenance. It nourishes a part of us that facts alone cannot reach. It helps us see more clearly, to feel more honestly. It lingers on what others rush past. And perhaps most importantly, poetry not only deepens our sense of the world as it is, it stretches our imagination to the world as it might still become. And because poetry can change how we see, how we live, how we feel, few poets in our time have embodied that more powerfully than Andrea Gibson. They were appointed the Poet Laureate of Colorado in 2023. Gibson has been called the Rumi of our time, the queer nation's genius savior poet. At the heart of their work are questions of identity, gender, belonging, mental health, and justice. At Gibson's memorial service, someone asked the audience, "Raise your hand if you've ever wanted to leave this world," and Andrea's words are what kept you here. More than 100 hands rose in response. That would be a powerful testimony at anyone's celebration of life. I first encountered Gibson's work this past July on the day they died far too young at the age of 49 from ovarian cancer. My social media feeds filled with people sharing how much Gibson's poetry had meant to them, how their words had helped them survive heartbreak, name their truth, and feel less alone. The first poem I read by Andrea Gibson is titled "Say Yes." It was one of the pieces shared most widely on the day of their death. It was first published in their book with the unbelievably good title of "Pole Dancing to Gospel Hymns." I'm here for it. You can catch a glimpse, even from that title alone, of how profound and subversive Gibson's work often was. This poem was written in November 2004, just 1 week after George W. Bush was elected for a second term. I don't know if you can remember that. I remember it very vividly. I remember how I felt. The sense of political despair at that time gives this poem an added urgency and makes it resonate powerfully in our own movement of Donald Trump's second term in office. In a time when it is easy to feel divided, disconnected, overwhelmed, this kind of connection that Gibson offers and writes about, it's not just beautiful, it is necessary. The poem begins with this line: "When two violins are placed in a room, if a chord on one violin is struck, the other violin will also sound that same note." Reflecting on the story behind the poem, Gibson has shared, "I learned that fact at the same time I learned that if you hug someone close for more than just a few seconds, your hearts will begin to synchronize." What's even more incredible is this. If one person in the hug is calm and the other anxious, the anxious heart will synchronize to the calm heart until both people are relaxed. In other words, we're constantly tuning to one another, whether we mean to or not. The question is not, do we influence the people around us? The question is, how do we choose to influence the people around us? What kind of music are we setting loose in the world? Gibson is naming more than a poetic metaphor. This is at its heart a deeply spiritual claim that we are not separate beings, we are relational ones. Our lives are bound up with one another, with what we cultivate in ourselves, fear or courage, despair or hope. That does not stay contained within us. It reverberates outward and back to us. That view resonates deeply with our UU value of interdependence. Gibson goes on to write, there's another part of this poem, Say Yes, where I write that the hardest thing about having nothing is having nothing to give. That line was written after Tony, an elderly man who'd been living on the streets for decades, asked me if I wanted to share his French fries when I walked by him downtown. I was 23 years old. We had lunch together that day, and it was one of the more impactful meals of my life. It helped me understand the importance of saying yes to other people's generosity, which is as vital, I believe, as being generous ourselves. It is with that spirit of openness to connection, to generosity, to one another, that I invite you to listen now to an excerpt of Gibson's poem, Say Yes. When two violins are placed in a room, if a chord on one violin is struck, the other violin will sound the note. If this is your definition of hope, this poem is for you. The ones who know how powerful we are, who know that we can sound the music and the people around us simply by playing our own strings. This is for the man who showed me that the hardest thing about having nothing is having nothing to give, who said the only reason to live is to give ourselves away. This is for the grandmother who walked 1,000 miles on broken glass to find that single patch of grass to plant a family tree, where the fruit would grow to laugh. For the ones who know that the math of war has always been subtraction. This is for the times you went through hell so someone else wouldn't have to. For the time you taught a 14-year-old girl that she was powerful. For the time you taught a 14-year-old boy that he was beautiful. For the radical anarchist asking a Republican to dance, because what are the chances of anyone moving from right to left if the only moves they ever see are NBC and CBS? This is for the no becoming yes, for the scars becoming breath, for saying I love you to the people who will never, ever say it to us. For scraping away the rust and remembering how to shine, for the dime you gave away when you didn't have a penny, for every song you've ever sung, for refusing to believe in miracles, because miracles are the impossible becoming true, and everything is possible. This is for the possibility that guides us and for the possibilities still waiting to sing, to spread their wings inside us, because tonight is Saturn on his knees proposing with all of his 10,000 rings, that whatever song we've been singing, we sing even more. The world needs us right now more than the world ever has needed us before. So pull all your strings, play every chord. If you're writing letters to prisoners, start tearing down the bars. If you're handing out flashlights in the dark, start handing out stars. Never go a second hushing that percussion of your heart. Play loud. Play like you know the clouds have left too many people cold and broken, and you are their last chance for sun. Play like there's no time for hoping brighter days will come. Play like the apocalypse is 4, 3, 2. But you have the drum in your chest that could save us. You have a song like a breath that could raise us, like the sunrise into a dark sky that cries out to be blue. Play like you know we won't survive if you don't, but we will if you do, that we give every single breath. This is for saying yes. This is for saying yes. There's a temptation, at least for me, after hearing something like that, to simply admit it and say, what a beautiful poem. But Gibson is asking more of us than admiration. They are asking us to live differently. That poem isn't just about hope, it's about responsibility. It's about the quiet, radical idea that who we are and how we live can awaken something in others. That our lives are not isolated instruments, but part of a larger, shared song. After encountering a poem like that, alive and resonating like a violin with other people, I wanted to read more. And again, I heard the same recommendation, the one that Michelle mentioned earlier, that one of the best places to begin is with their final poetry collection, You Better Be Lightning. If Say Yes is about the power we have to awaken one another, this next poem is about what happens when we finally allow ourselves to be awakened. I want to share with you an excerpt of my favorite poem from that collection. It's titled, Acceptance Speech After Setting the World Record in Goosebumps. Gibson writes, now I wasn't by any means a natural, was not born one of those wow hounds, born jaw-dropped. I was tough in the husk. When I was told there were 7 wonders of the world, I trusted the math, believed I had seen none of them. Of course, beauty hunted me. Beauty hunts everyone, but I outran it, hid in worry, regret, the promise of an afterlife or a week's end. But then one day, in a red velvet theater in New Orleans, I watched Maya Angelou walk on stage. 17 slow steps to the mic, she took a breath before speaking. And I could hear God being born in that breath. My every pore reached out like a hand pointing to the first unsinkable lotus in the bayou of the universe. I'd never felt anything like it. I searched the encyclopedia for that feeling's name when I got home. Goosebumps. Afterward, I thought, I can do this. Started training morning to night, crowbar swinging like a pendulum at the wall of my chest, tore the caution tape off of my life, and let everything touch it. My baby sister, sober for the first time in 13 years, calling to tell me she just noticed our mother's eyes are green. 505 goosebumps. One day, my friends scored tickets to a Prince concert. Tiny venue, I was right behind the sound booth. Prince's entire band that evening, women. At the end of the show, the sound person turned around and whispered, he didn't play one song on his set list the entire night. Now, I live on stages. I know what it is to scratch a plan, but not the whole trip, and still arrive at your destination 200 years before your time. 401 artists formerly known as Goosebumps. One night in Ann Arbor, my friend, still undiagnosed, could not uncurl her fingers to strum her guitar, so she sang the chords instead. It was the first time in my life I'd seen pain become an instrument. 10 dozen goosebumps for each and every note plucked from the string section of her refusal to silence her dream. After that, nothing in my world was gray. The oldest man in my hometown could not get to the door to listen to our carols, so we went inside and sang at his bedside instead. 24 boots on the front step catching snowflakes with their tongue, 776 goosebumps. At one point, everything started doing it. And the next day, I sharpened a tiny axe so I could split the seconds myself. Too much lives in a moment to not feed it into the fire of the heart. Slow. The biggest dog in the shelter hiding behind a teacup chihuahua, and the woman who came to adopt a cat, taking all three of them home. 1,012 goosebumps. Me at home, 2 months into chemotherapy, watching all the eyelashes fall to my cheeks, and realizing that was 400 wishes that I couldn't have made otherwise. There's no escaping the magic now. Beauty taught me and caught me and never let me go. And the thing about the world record in Goosebumps is if someone breaks it after me, and they will break it after me, I will love that so much that without even trying, I will break the world record in Goosebumps again. If those words stir something in you, maybe a little more aliveness, that is exactly what Gibson spent their life cultivating, not just in themselves, but in everyone around them. If you're wondering what kind of life produces poetry like that, the 2025 documentary, Come See Me in the Good Light, invites us more deeply into Andrea Gibson's life, into their love, their struggles, their luminous vulnerability that made their poetry so powerful. The film centers on their final year living with incurable ovarian cancer. It is both an intimate end-of-life portrait and a retrospective on their childhood, their identity, and their art, shaped by a particular kind of courage and tenderness that we glimpse in those final months. Let's take now just a moment to watch. It's about 2 minutes. Let's watch this trailer.
I usually get so upset when Meg edits my poems. She's a terrible editor.
Well, you know, I feel like if you could do this all on your own, I wouldn't be here. Andrea really thinks of poetry as what can I create to give to people. I think that's why it's been more long-lasting.
I grew up in a tiny town in the woods of northern Maine. I didn't know that somebody could grow up and make their living from art.
I wasn't by any means a natural. Was not one of those wow hounds born jaw-dropped. I was tough in the husk, untouched by rain.
At first I thought it was a stomach bug. But when it started feeling like a stomach anaconda, my doctor convinced me to get a CAT scan. This is the beginning of a nightmare, I thought. But stay with me, all. Because my story is one about happiness, being easier to find once we realize we do not have forever to find it. I wrote a new kind of bucket list. To sit with the mourning dove who cries for her lost love. To perform one last show. Why don't we just root for me being alive? And if I'm not, I will not feel bad about not being there.
We're almost there, Ange! We're almost there, you got it!
To touch Meg's face, and 100 times again. To remember everything.
All of these lines across my face.
Andrea's having a serious medical emergency.
I'm gonna bring it up to the nurse when she comes back because I think this might be a little bit more important.
I was made for you.
I want to close with these words from Andrea Gibson and their wife, the poet Megan Falley. It's from their co-authored book, How Poetry Can Change Your Heart. You deserve to have poetry in your life, to read things that delight you, to write things that set you free. to notice the poetry in the mundane until the mundane becomes fascinating. Remember, you too are the poem. And it is never too late for your heart to change in the direction of more magic, more beauty, more expansion, more purple, more wonder. Because we are the poem, the question is not whether beauty exists in the world. The question is whether we will choose to participate in the vast beauty of the world, whether we will choose to help create the kind of moments that stop others in their tracks. So I leave you with the question we began with. What is the last thing that stopped you in your tracks? And what kind of music is your life sending out into the world? We are, as Gibson suggests, instruments capable of sounding beauty in one another and music in one another. And this next ritual is one small way that we practice that together. I imagine that Andrea Gibson would be delighted if they were here this morning to help share in our annual practice of the beauty of flower communion, which reminds us not only of the importance of beauty, but also of the courage it takes to work for justice. Flower communion originated in 1923 in a Unitarian congregation in Prague. During a time of rising authoritarianism, the Unitarian minister Norbert Chapek created this ritual to celebrate beauty and diversity, the beauty and diversity that fascism seeks to stamp out. Just as no two flowers are alike, so no two of us are alike. And yet each of us has something to offer, and together our different flowers become something bigger, something none of us could have created alone. So please remain seated for now, but in a few moments when the music begins, you'll be invited to come forward row by row. Our intern minister will help. We're going to start over here and then go to this side, and over here y'all are going to flow this way and then back up that aisle, and then we'll end up over here. We're going to invite y'all to go out into the atrium and come down the same aisle and then back up the row. But we'll help facilitate all of that. Many of you brought flowers. If you didn't, some people brought bouquets, so we'd have enough. You're invited to take a flower different than the one that you came with. If you're online and unable to take one of these flowers, I invite you, if you're interested, to just as we do this ritual, listen inside yourself and consider, is there someone in my life that comes to mind that you might want to take a flower or a bouquet to in this next week? And that can be your flower communion. Let's prepare to celebrate flower communion together.